Welcome to The Edge, a podcast from the Bluntness where we unpack real-world experiences and expertise of seasoned and successful professionals across both the legal and legacy cannabis industry. I'm your host, Harrison Wise, the founder and publisher of The Bluntness. Joining us today is Jage, the founder and CEO of Jage Media, a business media and events company focused on cannabis brands and retailers. George, welcome.
Thank you, Harrison. Pleasure to be on your show today.
So you have quite an illustrious career in this industry, going as far back, I think, as 2014. So you've kind of seen the arc. What's your take on sort of where we're at as an industry these days?
Oh, well, that's a loaded question. And as you said, a lot to unpack, no pun intended. This is a really interesting time for the cannabis industry. One of the things I love about this space the most is that, it is complex. It is, challenging. And it's also, has huge promise and opportunity ahead of it. It seems sometimes we can't get out of our own way, or there's a complete and utter failure of government regulators and legislators to actually embrace the opportunity that's ahead of us. Really what I've and this is kind of almost kind of fundamental, and I'm not trying to just plug what we're doing with MJ Unpacked, but I've been in this space since 2014. We started seeing Colorado legalize, Washington, Oregon, California. All these states started coming online on the West Coast. And everybody's like, wow, this is really happening. And nobody really knew what, a legal cannabis business necessarily looked like. You had a lot of people kind of coming in from the culture of cannabis, deeply passionate about the plant medicine, and maybe didn't necessarily have the full suite of skills that, of managing accounting and sales and marketing and setting up an operational infrastructure and everything else. But it was certainly, we saw that come together, and we saw some people, create some very successful businesses out of the gate. But everybody needed, to kind of figure out what were the solutions they needed. So, when I was running MJBizCon and built that show up into what it became, people did need the light bulbs and label makers. They needed the machine in the corner that went bing. Kind of 2017, 2018, really started seeing the rise of the MSO. The Canadian Stock Exchange opened up. This kind of frontiers person approach to, getting licenses in new states. And then everybody started realizing, the incredible cost structure to, stand up all these individual licenses. You started seeing brands move into kind of this IP license brand, and people really just focusing on finding partners in these state markets rather than, the capital intensity of acquiring a license, setting up operations, having a completely different regulatory structure, probably different packaging, different formulations, and different raw materials that you have access to. And really, I think, probably 2021, I think this is really the golden age of the brand. And, we're at a point where so much in the early days, the relationship with the consumer has been with the retailer, and you're subject to what is available at that store at that time. There's not, any type of Bev Total Wines that you can go to and literally be in a warehouse of products yet. I know that there's people that are building this out. Certainly Planet 13, if you haven't been there, that's a really cool store to go visit. But, really where you have, can really see everything that's happening in the space. But we are seeing the brands build those relationships directly with the consumer. We're seeing some softening in some of the marketing channels like Twitter, that people can use. LinkedIn's always been very friendly. Although my friend did mention that he got shadow banned by LinkedIn. I'm like, who gets shadow banned by LinkedIn? He's like, well, I was posting pictures of this new product that launched in California. It's like these little cannabis pizza bites. And then he was, smoking a joint and doing some videos on there. So he kind of pushes the envelope for the rest of it.
A little too far over the line. That's
he might have pushed the envelope a little bit. So, I think this is where really, when you look at the overall trajectory, cannabis has this kind of, multi-path way forward. There's a pharmaceutical application where we're seeing, cannabis being used as medicine that can replace, some very deadly and dangerous narcotics that the federal government has no problem selling or allowing them banking, by the way.
Yep.
It has obviously some industrial applications when you start getting in the hemp side, but ultimately, cannabis is going to be a consumer packaged goods industry. This is going to get normalized. The U.S. is still the global leader in exporting brands. So, what we see happen here, I think, is going to be the birthing of giants. I mean, we are going to see the future Anheuser-Busch, Seagrams, Bacardis of cannabis, emerging out of this period of time in the industry, hopefully in tandem with some progressive legislation to allow interstate commerce or, some type of reprieve on the overtaxation of our industry, getting rid of the 280E, safe banking, all these things that need to happen for us to really actualize our industry.
How do you like balance the priorities though of, because like typically the only people that could afford lobbyists to help address some of those things are, well-funded MSOs or publicly traded companies, but
Sure.
that doesn't always trickle down to the interests of mom and pop operators or, the smaller businesses that want to build a legacy for themselves and their families, right? So how do you, what's your opinion in terms of like,
How does this play out?
Yeah, how does that play out, right? Because it's only the interests of those who have the money to pursue those interests, right? So
I mean, it'd be hard to not suggest that our commercial and legislative systems are not skewed to tilt and favor those who are financially paying for that type of legislation. And I think this is a really serious issue that needs to be addressed. There's no doubt that the MSOs are investing significant capital trying to advance. And they're going to do that serve their best interest, but it does have a trickle down effect for the entire industry, hopefully. But I do think that this is a huge problem. Like the independent operators in this space have this is a really tough business, especially if you don't have scale to operate a retail, a cultivation, or a brand, manufacturing a brand. The representation of any legislation that's being advanced, they're missing. They're not representing the entire class, as you said, right? Like there's this huge swath of people. And if you combine all of the retail doors that exist out in the cannabis industry right now, I mean, I would suspect that it would stack up probably 3 to 5x the number of doors that, all the MSOs have combined. So, this is, I think that there's a need to kind of organize and coalesce the voice of these independent operators. We feel that our event does that to an extent. My wife and I who run this business, we've been small business people our whole lives. My father was, my grandfather was, my great-grandfather Habib came from Lebanon and opened up a barbershop on State Street in Chicago and had a casino in the back room. So there's a legacy aspect to this for me too. I just definitely I think that we need to address that and make sure that the independent operator has the tools they need and also representation to help support their businesses as well. We're seeing this play out in New York, in real time. I mean, they set this up specifically to reparate the harm done to people who have been criminalized for cannabis, but there's a failure to launch the market successfully because they didn't get the funding that they thought they were going to have. The MSOs are all banging on the door saying, "Hey, if we step in, maybe there's a way that we can help." With a compromised situation that, can, rising tide can lift all boats.
But they don't want to pay to play though. It sounds like in New York specifically, they don't want to pay to play because there is a price for that.
Yeah, there is, and it's, we've got so many different models out there and like, who's really, you almost need like a think tank group that can go in and really analyze all these state models and find out what's working, what's not, maybe I'll reach out to, Bill Gates and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, see if they can help us with this. But there's that real need and I don't know. I mean, I think there's a way that the New York OCM could break without bending or bend without breaking, to really still continue to kind of support their, trajectory, but also give some market access to the MSOs. I mean, they gave them market access for the medical market. They're ready. They're operating. They have product. They could open up stores, lickety split. Maybe there's ways that they can, they're required to help support another business or they partner with other businesses. There's always a concern that, some of these social equity license, the MSOs come in and, or other groups have come in. I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but, in a predatory way where, there's a social equity license, they get the license, they sell it off and have a stub in this business and eventually squeeze out the social equity operator whose the whole intent was to support, creating some income and generational wealth inside those communities most harmed by the bullshit war on drugs.
Agreed. So your events business has been around for several years, the MJ Unpacked conference specifically. and you have an event coming up in New York at the end of April. Tell me about sort of, what's changed from, what it was like a few years back to where we're at now.
Well, this is definitely one of the more interesting businesses that I've been involved in building. Because we started out in 2020 with this concept, a very simple premise, and our thesis was, cannabis is a consumer packaged goods industry. The largest and most important event in any consumer packaged goods industry is focused on brands and retailers. And every other show that we saw out in the marketplace was unqualified audiences, all supply side, and didn't really meet the needs of these are the apex, the vanguard of our industry. And any type of supply chain purchasing decision starts, on those three pillars of cultivation, manufacturing, and or retail, that are going to drive up the supply chain that would, benefit these supply side shows. And we also saw that these, decision makers for the retailers and brands don't go to the big supply side shows. They're not looking for light bulbs and label makers. They're looking for deal flow. They're looking for investment capital. They're looking to find partners in other states that they can expand their footprint. So we kind of, adopted this philosophy of kind of meeting the needs of the market at the moment. So we get the company started, we launch it, get some initial seed funding, February 2020, let's go. And then the entire world shuts down. I mean, it was, I don't know. I mean, I think 2020 I refer to as year zero in our kind of plans, because we didn't get anywhere. We did launch a number of virtual events. We did them faster, better, and more frequently than anybody else in the cannabis space, but they suck just as much as everybody else's. You don't create that type of interpersonal connection that, you can build trust, and you can meet somebody, you can read their body language, you find out what their value set is and see if it's shared with what yours are. And this is somebody I want to do business with. If you don't establish that initial relationship and trust in that relationship, you're never going to get a business deal done. And you can't do that, as an avatar or as, chatbotting with somebody. So fast forward, we, as we launched our event in October of 2021, about 16, 17 months ago now. And I'm really proud. I mean, it's hard to kind of, win that mind share and build that fan base and create that FOMO of like, this is an event that's going to be highly productive. Everybody in the room is a decision maker. We are offering turnkey, low cost, cost efficient, exhibitor solutions to kind of take the waste out of the trade show model, and providing access to capital and everything else. And we, we're very convicted in that this is the right business model for the market right now, and this is where things are going. We're a little bit ahead of our time because there's not a national market yet. There's not any interstate commerce. But we know that, that is where we'll get to. So we're going to keep grinding, and New York's popping, right show, right place, right time with the right people in the room. And I think that, the market's, caught on and realizes that this is where deals are going to get done.
Yeah, I've been to a few of your events, and they are, I think, really well structured. I think exactly as you just outlined, that connection between those two stakeholders is very important. And I think staying committed to that kind of focus, I think, is what sets you guys apart. And it's a very powerful format.
Thank you. I think it's easy sometimes, especially when you have, big trade show conglomerates that look at an industry and say, okay, we just need to get, this group here and this group here. And they look at it in the context of, I need to sell, real estate 100 square feet at a pop, and I just need to sell a ticket and not really care. Like, what's the journey, right? And, and not to pick on MJ Biz, but, they're the big show in the industry right now at the moment. They had 120 packaging labeling companies at their show. I'm sure that there's nobody in that organization that took the time to figure out how many people are coming looking for packaging and labeling to determine if those companies are going to have a successful return on investment, because there's probably 100 packaging and labeling companies behind them that they can sell booth space to if they don't have a good experience. So,
Right.
We always look at it from the journey. Like Wendy, who's our vice president of sales, been with us since the beginning, Kim and I since the beginning, and she worked with me over at Dope Magazine. Our sales team takes the time, and the first thing is like, what are your objectives, right? Like, what do you want to get out of the show? We want to make sure that we can, deliver on that. We kind of cap how many companies can exhibit per category. So that there's not, 122 packaging companies, we'll have 5 or 6 that, we see as being, some of the best in the market. And it's not to be exclusive, but like if we over dilute that side of the, table and there's way too many people over there, it's going to hurt everybody. So it's kind of controlling the growth, which is challenging. We're running a business. We need to make payroll just like everybody else. There's people that don't qualify for an event that would be willing to give us money. It's not about, taking their dollars. It's about, creating value for the industry. With that, we will create, continued success for our business, but it's a product of that. It's not a function of that.
Do you have sights set on the international market at all? Because most of your events obviously are focused here in the U.S.
Yeah, that's kind of another level up, to expand internationally, and there's a lot of challenges there. I mean, you go to Europe. I mean, yes, Europe, the EU, great, but you're still dealing with, a series kind of like the U.S., a bunch of different state markets, and then you have some language barriers. You do a show in Germany, it's going to be a German show. You do a show in England, it's an English show. You go to, Brussels or Amsterdam, trying to kind of, be this little kind of hub of the spoke, but I haven't seen that be really, really successful. Certainly, again, the international markets. I mean, what's happening in Thailand and in Europe and in South America, are exciting opportunities. But I think if we can continue to focus on, a little bit of a narrower goal, you've seen this too. I mean, companies early on in the late, 2015 era, everybody was kind of getting in the space, and you saw this kind of, I call it squirrelitis, right? Like everybody's like, oh, squirrel, and they run over here and do this and they do that, and they lose focus of what they're trying to accomplish as a business objective and as their primary business goals. And next thing you know, they're spread so thin, and they're doing a ton of stuff and none of it great, and they eventually get ground out of the market.
Yep, that's pervasive, and I think because most folks want results, they want it now, right? So they think that's going to help them get that. A lot of, not too many people have the long game in mind, but that's really where legacy, and substantial brands are built and what have you. Apple, people think it happened overnight. 13-year trajectory, CEO was fired and then brought back. Like there's these, even Facebook, took time to become Facebook, and there was something that preceded it called Friendster. So I think even, in my experience with some of the brands in the cannabis space, they want it now, they want it yesterday. Everything's sort of right. They very few have that sort of longevity in mind, that the fact that it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, there's a lot of societal forces that encourage instant gratification behavior, right? I mean, our phones, right? I mean, we've got our phones, it's really easy to kind of like, oh, I need to take a break. I'm just gonna, play Candy Crush or Sudoku or something like that, right? And it's like it's all it's doing is kind of reinforcing that need for an instant endorphin, dopamine hit, and we do need to catch our breaths and look at the long game. I mean, it is choppy waters out there right now because of the overtaxation, the 280E, the lack of access to capital. I mean, a lot of, private investment, dollars have dried up. A lot of the VCs, haven't provided round trips for their, investors, so they can't go get more money from the investors and say, hey, look at how good we did here, so give us some more money, we'll do better. And so if they have any dry powder, they got to hang on to it, because there's a lot of companies invested in that are going to be making some capital calls. And all of those things just, seem to compound on top of each other. But, and for, new money coming in, I mean, do you want to invest in a private company that is going to, lack the liquidity when you can go and buy some of these, publicly traded companies that, 80% down from their peak, knowing that eventually they're going to get back there if they survive, or they get gobbled up and you roll into that, but you have that immediate liquidity in that investment, right?
Right. Do you anticipate introducing, since that is such a big pain point in the industry, do you anticipate incorporating a capital, content track within the conference?
We already do, actually. So when we started out, I mean, kind of looking at it and saying, hey, our focus is on brands and retailers. What are the needs in the market at the moment? Access to capital, certainly top of the list, right? So when we launched MJ Unpacked back in 2021, we created our money stage as kind of an attractor to the investor set to come to the show. We did that in the first 3 shows. And the challenge with it is it's probably one of the worst products that we sell somebody, because we have so little control over the outcome. It's going to be dependent on how much, money's in the room. It's going to be dependent on how good the deal is, right? And so we can push those people into the room, and we've done things that we got people in the room. But, if a lot of the people that have really good deals are probably getting those funded before they get to our stage. So we might not be seeing the best opportunities. And a lot of them, people that want to pitch, are startups, and there's not as big of an appetite for, new ancillary businesses or startups right now, when, the people who have been at it for a while aren't showing that they're wildly successful yet.
Yeah.
So we actually pivoted in last fall. We launched our Venture Summit. And the Venture Summit is basically, it runs concurrent the opening day. We've got our main conference. We've got some amazing speakers. These are licensed operators with proven success stories. We don't sell our stage, so it's not like somebody getting up there and pitching you how they're a consultant, know how to run your business better than you, even though they've never walked a mile in your shoes. And then we have our Venture Summit. The Venture Summit is exclusively for fund managers, high net worth investors, and family office executives. And, this is, a lot of our exhibitors like, how do I get into that room? Like, we don't want you in there. We want to keep this exclusive so that it's really a bespoke, opportunity for those investors. They feel very comfortable. They want to compare notes. Now, as part of that program, anybody who's raising capital that's exhibiting at our show, we're collecting the information. The final session of the Venture Summit, we're going to go through. Here's all the companies that are raising money on the floor. Here's a list of those companies, the name of the person you want to talk to, and where their booth's located. And then we're going to give them an hour early access to the show floor. Now, there's still the additional 2 days of the event that they're not going to talk to everybody, but they can get in there and really kind of, have an opportunity to, scout out some of the good opportunities on the show floor and go to their booth and see, like, this is how they're presenting themselves to the market. As the investor goes, wow, these guys really kind of stand out from the crowd. There's something here. They're going to dig in.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think another thing that I feel differentiates your event from others is that you do allocate and dedicate space specifically for equity brands. So again, hats off to you for that. What do you think the biggest challenges is for some of those brands that are trying to really stand out and make a name for themselves?
Access to capital. And so. We're very grateful. We have a great partnership with our academy, which is a pre-accelerator for social equity and BIPOC-owned businesses. We go out and raise money, have the clients send it right to them, so that those companies can, get travel stipends. They can participate in the show, and they can bring their product to market. It's challenging. I mean, certainly diversity, equity, and inclusion are very important to us. It's something that, we have an opportunity to kind of shape this industry in its early days to make sure that underrepresented voices have a seat at the table. We want to make sure the legacy market has an opportunity to be a part of the show. We want to make sure the people that are serving time right now for nonviolent marijuana crimes are released from prison. We have an opportunity, and I think a responsibility as an event organizer, that we're building this community that we can kind of influence the narrative of what the industry is going to ultimately decide how it wants to behave. But the first couple shows, I don't know if you went to the Blues Brothers concert we had at the Mandalay Bay. I think at that show, we raised close to $100,000 that we donated to Last Prisoner Project. We lost money, but that was the right thing to do. Like, we have to make sure that we have, an opportunity to support these organizations that are doing some really hero work. Last Prisoner Project and Justice Foundation, which is, focusing on making sure legacy has a pathway to, the legal market. So they both have kind of a commonality in their mission. They're going to be doing some stuff at our event in tandem as kind of a collaboration. We're ironing out all the details right now, but we're always going to make sure that we can support the organizations that are doing really good work in the industry, and especially now because, as the kind of economic downturn, happened in 2022, bean counters are going, all right, cut travel, cut marketing spend, right? Yep. Let's cut subscriptions. Let's cut association membership, and certainly cutting donations to, any type of foundation or advocacy group. Usually some of the easier things that they want to cut off. I mean, I would hope someday that they all have to take a marketing class and understand that those things are actually critical to them to maintain during any type of downturn, to make sure that they have not decreased their funnel. So when things do improve, that they can accelerate back to the market.
It's a short-sighted mistake that a lot of businesses and CFOs make, but it's the easiest thing to cut. So
yeah, you're a media company. You know what's going on out there. There's a lot of events out there. Everybody's got their hand out for these kind of corporate sponsorship dollars that have dried up. And, you know, some of the bigger players in the market, you know, you're seeing, you know, boards go in and force, you know, the founders out of the business and take control of the asset. You know, huge capital raises, huge down rounds, you know, it's going to be interesting. I mean, you know, there's possibility we might see a couple of the big MSOs start to fall. I mean, we're already starting to see some cracks there. That would be unfortunate in the sense that would have repercussions across the industry and just continue to weaken investor confidence.
Why do you think the industry is so sort of, you know, wrought with these sort of, you know, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Just poorly run businesses. I mean, there's business fundamentals that should apply to pretty much any industry. Why is cannabis operating in a deficit pretty much right out of the gate, aside from 280E and all the obvious things? But
yeah, I mean,
those aren't insurmountable. I don't feel, if you're focused on running a business that makes more money than you spend. I mean, it's a pretty relatively simple.
Yeah, equation. I mean, we've all heard the, you know, suits versus the stoners, and it's I think it's also culture versus commerce, and I don't think that they have to be, you know, a versus in there. I mean, I think it's, you know, the very, you know, beginning of the industry again, like, you know, I'm running MJBizCon. We're doing it at a casino property in Vegas. We have signs up, you know, can't smoke pot in here. This is a, you know, gaming property. They, you know, their gaming license is way more important than us as guests. You know, and I'm standing there and we're opening the show and this guy's standing in the registration line. He pulls out a joint, sparks it up. And I'm just like, listen, I respect the plant, right? I'm a consumer myself for a long time. And at the same time, I'm like, do you understand? Here's how this is going to go down. If somebody from the hotel sees you doing this, they're going to detain you. They're going to hand you over to the local police. They can detain you for 72 hours without processing you. They set that law up in Nevada because they want to be able to throw the asshole that comes out, you know, for his bachelor party and is being abusive, or, you know, really for the card counters and the crooks. And then you're going to get blacklisted from, you know, Caesar's properties for life. And I said, you know, just go outside, use a little bit of discretion, and everybody can. He said, oh, I'm so sorry. Right. But he wanted to make a stance. He's like, I'm in the weed industry. I'm going to smoke a joint. Right. So there's a time and a place. Right.
Sure.
And we all want to kind of advance that idea that this is not a dangerous product. That the stigma is a lot of propaganda from the Nixon, you know, and Reagan eras. A lot of the people that came into the industry at that time, going back to your question, you know, I think, you know, came from a place of passion. They might've been drug dealers themselves. I mean, I had an herbal distribution business when I was younger. I get it. And the skill set required for that is vastly different than operating a business where you have to have, you know, some type of accounting software, and you have to have SOPs, and you have to have insurance, and you have to, you know, manage your human resources. And so there's a pretty big skill set, and you kind of saw all the suits come in, and it was suits versus stoners. But yeah, I think that we've seen the people that have been successful in the space, you know, have a good, you know, business head on their shoulders, have a deep respect for the plant and the culture of the plant, have been good leaders and, you know, servant leaders to really support the people that are helping their business grow. And I think that there's not really a one or the other. It's not, you know, them and us or us and them. I think it's, you know, when you have an organization where you can bring that culture, you know, and make that a central part of your company's kind of core value set, but understand you're running a business, and then have the people that have some, you know, past experience. Now I see people come in from mainstream industries, you know, time and time again, that have fallen on their face or don't get it. And eventually they do, or they leave. So I think we're getting to the point, and this is, you know, maybe where this capital crunch is going to weed out the weaker players. Mm-hmm. Just talked to somebody in Colorado yesterday. He said there's 30 some businesses that are distressed assets for sale, and there's no buyers. And why are they distressed? Are they poorly run? Is it just because there's, you know, 6 cannabis shops on the same street and there's not enough, you know, buyers in that market? Did they pay too much for the real estate that they, you know, because everybody jacked up their, you know, prices when, you know, cannabis became legal? Did they borrow too much money at terms that they can't live up to now that there's a contraction? And this is where, you know, I think just kind of basic business, like if you're a highly levered business, meaning that you have a lot of debt, and certainly if that's tied to any type of variable interest rate and the market contracts, you are going to get squeezed hard. So maybe this is just a part of the natural progression that we need to kind of correct the market. And there's some oversaturation in several markets that are causing price declines. Maybe if there's less players, it can stabilize, and the market forces and kind of open capital market forces can stabilize that and create some successful businesses and continue to have growth in the category as a whole.
So hopefully it's not all doom and gloom. What are you optimistic about in the industry specifically? What are we looking forward to?
I think that well, first and foremost is I think continuing to see this innovation around the brands, right? I do have glorious optimism that someday we're going to see a federal regulatory structure so cannabis can brands can really expand their footprint. People can create some economies of scale so these businesses aren't suffering. We're not getting punitively taxed. And I'm excited about that, but I also stay up and worry. It's like I know that big alcohol, tobacco, and pharma all have, and CPG have plans in and around this space to enter the market after federal legalization happens. What I don't want to see happen is that we lose the thought leadership of cannabis to other industries. And I don't want to see the independent operators get squeezed out of the market, because this is where innovation happens, right? This is where, you really build the relationships with your customers. And I think, we just don't need cannabis to be a big box industry, right? And, I think that, having those premium, highly curated markets, having very cool consumption lounges, and maybe they're one and the same where you can buy your weed and consume it in various form factors, beverage, edibles, hookahs,
all the above,
dab bars.
So we're coming up on the end of our time. Any parting thoughts you want to share before we close out?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is such a critical time for, a lot of the independent retailers, a lot of these smaller brands, they're facing some big challenges, and it's hard for anybody when you've got that type of pressure on you to kind of, say, oh, I should just, fly out to New York and go to this conference, or fly wherever and go to a conference. But whether it's ours or anybody else's, like the need for you to build your professional network. I mean, there's so many lessons to be learned out there. People that you don't know that have faced challenges, that have walked a mile in your shoes, that have faced the same challenges, might be able to provide you a solution and save your business, save you money, save you employees, whatever the case is. And I think making sure you feel connected to a community, and a community of your peers. That's the critical part, right? Going to, a place where it's just a bunch of looky-loos and tire kickers. Like I don't know how many people have reached out to you, but I'm sure a lot, that know that you're in the cannabis space. Like, hey, can I pick your brain? I'm really thinking of getting in the space. And you take the time, for certain people, and other people you just kind of delete. But like, I don't know how, I can't explain to somebody in an hour, like all of the complex nuances that are required to operate a successful business in the cannabis space. And not only that, like, how different it is in each state market, from cost of a license to, market share and growth opportunities and everything else. So you really need to kind of just jump into the deep end of the pool. If you're looking to get in the cannabis industry, go get a job at a dispensary, even if you're massively overqualified, and learn the ropes before you go out and do it, because you're going to, you think you get a cannabis license and you have a license to print money, you are sorely mistaken. You will have a huge opportunity for success, but you got to go through the ringer first.
Absolutely. Trial by fire in this industry. So.
Yes, we're all firewalkers, right?
So with the conferences, events and after parties are always a big deal. What's on tap for your conference later this month?
Well, as you well know, Bluntness and several other media companies are having a big soiree on Thursday night. This is always kind of a blessing and a curse. I had this conversation. Like, when I was running MJ Biz, like I went out and got other groups to have parties because the ownership didn't want to invest in that. And it's hard to kind of, do that for everybody, and the cost for, hosting people. But it's a key part of any event to really have that after hours experience. It's people let their hair down, you meet interesting people you might not have met at the show floor, or just in a more relaxed environment. We try to bring that to our show floor. We have a big party on our show floor on Wednesday night from 5 to 7. There's a bunch of parties being stood up, including yours, at the event, and I think this is going to be a really good time. But creating that opportunity for people to go out, have fun, and like, did you hear what happened there? Did you hear what happened there? And creating that water cooler moment in the morning kind of makes us feel part of a family, a work family, or a industry family, right?
Indeed.
So, So why don't we shamelessly plug your event? So you guys are doing this on what, Thursday night?
Thursday night, April 27th, 8 p.m. to midnight. Again, we're partnered with a number of independent, minority, and women-owned cannabis events and media publishers.
You got Honeysuckle. You got my guys, Joey and Mitch over at Respect My Region.
Right.
I love Ronit. She's great at Honeysuckle. Sensi's coming in.
That's right. And Fairchild and Joint Venture and Co. Yeah.
Dave and James, great guys here in Seattle. Really enjoyed my time working with them at Dope. And they listen, those guys, Dave and James, know how to throw a party. They have a certain finesse to that is probably unmatched in the industry by many.
Indeed. And yeah, we're looking forward to have fun, looking forward to attending the conference and meeting a bunch of great retailers and brands that are, really trying to break through and grow and scale, not just in New York, but across the country. So I want to thank George for joining us today. And for, again, just being a great organizer of people through his events at MJ Unpacked. Thanks for joining us today, George. Really appreciate it.
I look forward to bringing everybody together in New York at our event, at your party, everything else. Let's smoke some weed and celebrate all we've accomplished and figure out a way to move it forward.
Amen. Sounds good. Thanks again, George.
All right. Thanks, Harrison.